The Allied victory in Europe in May 1945 is usually remembered as a moment of liberation. Cities celebrated, concentration camps were opened, and the Nazi regime collapsed in ruins. For millions of people, however, the end of the war did not bring safety or freedom. It marked the beginning of another mass removal of civilians, one that would permanently reshape Central and Eastern Europe. In the years immediately following the war, millions of ethnic Germans were expelled from their homes, stripped of their citizenship, and forced westward. They were not removed for individual crimes, but for who they were, the language they spoke, and the history attached to them. This was not a spontaneous collapse into chaos. It was a policy, discussed and approved at the highest levels of the victorious Allied powers. In this video, we are going to discuss the dark, hidden past, the ethnic cleansing of millions of innocent Germans. To understand how this happened, it is necessary to understand that Germans were not confined to the borders of modern Germany. Long before Germany became a unified state in 1871, German-speaking communities existed across Europe. They lived in Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Yugoslavia, and the Baltic region. Some had been there for centuries. Others were the result of earlier imperial expansion. After the First World War, new nation-states were carved out of defeated empires. In the process, millions of Germans became minorities overnight. These minorities were often viewed with suspicion, resented for their economic position, or associated with past foreign rule. Hitler exploited these grievances. He claimed to be protecting ethnic Germans abroad while using them as justification for expansion. The annexation of Austria and the Sudetenland blurred the line between ethnic solidarity and outright conquest. To many in Eastern Europe, Germans were no longer neighbors or citizens. They were seen as the root cause of catastrophe. By the final years of the war, Allied leaders were already planning what to do with Europe's German populations. Removing minorities, it was argued, would prevent future wars. This logic ignored the human cost. At conferences in Tehran, Yalta, and Potsdam, the Allies agreed that Germany's eastern borders would shift westward. Millions of Germans living beyond those new borders would be expelled. In practice, it meant forced marches, overcrowded trains, improvised camps, and mass death. As the Red Army advanced westward in late 1944 and early 1945, millions of Germans fled ahead of it. Entire families moved in winter conditions, often on foot, carrying what they could. Many froze to death. Others starved. Those who stayed behind were often subjected to violence, including mass rape and summary executions. After the fighting ended, expulsions accelerated. In Czechoslovakia, ethnic Germans were stripped of citizenship and property almost immediately. They were required to wear identifying armbands, barred from public spaces, and forced into labor. Deportations were rapid and brutal. Villages were emptied with little notice. People were marched to borders or interned in camps where disease and abuse were widespread. In Poland, the scale was even larger. The country had suffered immense destruction and loss under German occupation. Revenge was widespread and often encouraged. German civilians were herded into ghettos, former prisons, and reused concentration camps. Food was scarce. Medical care was minimal or non-existent. Thousands died from starvation and illness alone. In some camps, cruelty became systematic. Guards abused prisoners with impunity. Children and the elderly were not spared. Deaths were so frequent that burial became routine labor for survivors. These were not extermination camps in design, but the mortality rates rivaled them. Elsewhere in Eastern Europe, similar patterns emerged. In Yugoslavia, remaining German populations were rounded up. Many were shot outright. Others were sent to labor camps or deported to the Soviet Union. Entire communities disappeared within a few years. Children who survived were often placed in state institutions and forbidden from speaking German, effectively erasing their identity. Hungary and Romania followed a different path, but the outcome was similar. Under pressure from the Soviet Union, ethnic Germans were deported or stripped of property. Many were sent to labor camps in the USSR. Others were resettled in a Germany already devastated by war, where housing and food were scarce. By the late 1940s, the worst violence had subsided. Deportations became more organized. International relief organizations provided limited assistance. But by then, the damage was done. An estimated 12 million Germans had been expelled from Eastern Europe. Hundreds of thousands had died from violence, disease, exposure, or exhaustion. Some estimates place the death toll far higher. There would be no trials, no commissions, and no widespread acknowledgement. The suffering of Germans did not fit the post-war narrative. To admit wrongdoing would complicate the moral clarity of victory. The expulsions were reframed as necessary, inevitable, or justified. For decades, the topic remained marginal outside Germany. Survivors rebuilt their lives in silence. Entire cultures vanished from regions they had inhabited for generations. Towns changed names. Languages disappeared from public life. The ethnic cleansing of Germans after World War II was not an accident of chaos. It was a deliberate effort to redraw Europe along ethnic lines. It succeeded. And because it succeeded, it is often treated as settled history rather than a warning. What makes this story uncomfortable is not just the scale of suffering, but the fact that it occurred with international approval. In the aftermath of a war fought in the name of justice. It reminds us that victimhood and guilt can coexist, and that mass punishment does not require innocence to be devastating. This chapter of history is not forgotten because it lacks evidence. It is forgotten because it challenges simple stories about the end of the war and forces us to confront what victory allowed.